So the next speaker is Yogesh Mundada from Princeton. I mean, newly at Princeton before Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech.
Oh, you're still at Georgia Tech. All right. And he will present a tool called Appu that will help you estimating and controlling how your personal information is being diffused.
Thank you.
Can you switch? Yes. Okay.
Thank you for the introduction. So yeah, this is a joint work with Nick Feimster and Balachandar Krishnamurthy. So users of World Wide Web open accounts on various different online services, and over a period of time, they keep submitting various information, sometimes sensitive, sometimes private. And after some duration, it becomes hard for the user to track where all of his information is lying, and if it is sufficiently protected with proper passwords, or if she is sharing the information with some of the services where she shouldn't be. So we have built a tool where user can get all this information at one single place in the browser as a Chrome browser plugin. So before moving ahead, let me just quickly summarize what are the threat vectors here. First of all, whenever user shares some information on a web server, and if the server gets compromised, all that information can be downloaded from the database, and hacker has control over it. Worse, due to password reuse, other accounts of the same users can also be compromised, and overall identity theft can occur. Second is privacy compromises can unknowingly occur from first-party web pages when they load third-party advertisement. While doing so, they can unintentionally send some PI fields, personal information fields such as username. And if that username is closely related to your real-life identity, then basically the third-party ad networks can track and associate your online activities with your real-life identity. Secondly, government agencies can use similar surveillance technique as third parties, as well as they can forcefully get the data from web services. So to prevent and protect and make user aware of all these things, there has been a lot of related work. First of all, while creating the account, they force the user to choose specific policies such as capital letter. But due to password overload, users just freeze.
Maybe it's. The NSA decided to. Okay, let's see. Is there a particular graphics coming on, like a big thing? No? Okay. Looks like it's totally okay. I probably will have to just quit and restart. No problem. We are actually not. Anyone working for Microsoft here? Okay, restart. Sorry about. No, that's not the right one. Yes, this is a. Yeah. We have it again. Okay, that's not totally.
I'll go.
Okay, you're good. Okay.
So due to password overload, users often end up reusing the password, which is fine when they create the account. But over a period of time, once they start sharing more sensitive information, they should change the password, but that doesn't happen. Secondly, the recent studies show that users, even though they are reusing the password, they do have mental models where they classify websites into different classes, but often these mental models are imperfect and do not actually capture all the information that user is sharing. Then there are password managers, but many people don't want to use them because one point of failure, as well as it's uncomfortable feeling to let somebody else handle your passwords. And recent research also shows that they are not as secure as they were thought to be. The privacy tools that manage the third-party leakage are either inflexible due to white box or black box approaches, or impersonal because they don't focus on actual user data. But the main focus of this equation is the user himself, and they often lack understanding about what is happening with their data, as well as where it is going. And another aspect to this is from the past research, it is shown that if the user believes he is anonymous on a site, he will act differently as compared to when he thinks he is not. But often when the user thinks he is anonymous, he might not be. So we have built Appu, which is a browser plugin, which helps user to tackle all these problems, such as sensitive information detection, detecting the implicit user trust bit as he shares more and more sensitive information with the web services, then provide the user tips to change his behavior using personalized argument rather than rigid rules, and finally show the user all of his data at one single place. So before going that, let me quickly show the three broad categories of passwords. First of all, each password provides accessibility function. So anytime you use a password, that is what is happening. But if users provides real name or real address, then it also acquires privacy privileges. At the same time, if user submits something like social security number, then it elevates it to confidentiality. So why is classifying user accounts so hard? So to show that, let me take example of two users, John and Jane, which both of them have accounts on these 6 web services. An intuitive classification could be something like this, like PayPal and Google are highest, most secure, versus least secure is Reddit because it's anonymous. But if we do the classification on the basis of actual data shared by both John and Jane, then we see completely different picture. For example, for John, since he has given credit card number, the Amazon is confidential, versus for Jane, she just has some random account with fake name. At the same time, for Reddit, both of them have fake usernames and think that this is least important site. But Jane has given email, which is closely resembling to her real life name. So it becomes a privacy class for that password. So Appu tries to monitor this information exchange using built-in personal information store, where it populates various personal information fields that the user is giving out on accounts such as paypal.com or from Amazon, credit card numbers and full names. Now, one thing about this is for all the information collected in PI store, there is a bit associated with the information such as verified or not verified. And that is verified is set to true if we can rely on some third party to veto that information that this is actually user's real name. So over the time, this personal information store can get populated with all different kinds of information such as time spent or addresses or even uploaded files. So to show how Appu actually populates this PI store, there are two methods. First is active, and during active method, we have developed something called FPI scripts. So what happens is, using those FPI scripts, we download the user's information from account, populate the personal information store, and then during passive phase, we monitor web pages, user input, and third-party requests, basically parameters and cookie values, and then keep updating and adding the personal information store. Next, I describe quickly what is FPI script. So to detect automatically the sensitive information, we basically exploit this fact that user has already created a lot many accounts and they already contain all this information, such as employment history is present on LinkedIn or education is present on both LinkedIn and Facebook. Second, we wait for user to log in into an account and then we download the user's information with his permission. So to do that, we have developed this small scripting language called FPI for fetch personal information, which is a modified XML format containing CSS selectors. And each node in that XML format has selectors, action directives, and children. Children could have their own selectors and action directives. So when the FPI is executed after user logs in, it basically applies parent selector to the web page. The resulting result is executed as an action directive, something like fetch the href or bring me the subtree of HTML document. And the result is passed to the children to apply their own selectors and action directives. So using these FPIs, we can download more information, but it is also challenging because if the web page structure changes, then you have to recreate them. So that is one challenge, and second is it has to be fast. So to make stable FPIs, we exploit both the document structure as well as the information that we want to download. So for example, on a web page, there is information name is equal to John Doe. Then we use name as a key anchor and first locate that, and then travel to the most common ancestor, from which we travel back to the value itself. So once that is done, we focus on passive monitoring. During passive monitoring, whenever the user visits a web page, we look for if any of the personal information fields are already present. Second is we also track the current information spread by monitoring user input. For example, user logs in, then we add the username as well as password with the additional information such as strength, whether this password has been reused, or what is the leakage status for the password, and similar things for rest of the PI fields. Finally, whenever a web page, first-party web page makes a request to the third parties, we scan the HTTP request parameters as well as cookie values for personal information fields. So an example, the user can see all this information at one single place. For example, he can see John Doe, which is credit card verified name because it was present on Amazon. And the same information has also been present on Grubhub. Similarly, for credit cards, social security numbers, as well as for files uploaded, all this information will be shown at one single place. From time to time, Appu will show helpful hints to the user to change their passwords or improve their security. So for example, something like Appu has noticed social security number has been given out and this password is reused across lower security sites. So please change the password. So from trial deployment, there were 2 trial deployments, one with the latest, all the latest features. And what we found was the latest one with 9 users, that 3 passwords were already leaked and present in the password list for in the hands of attackers. And 2 of them contained access to confidential information. At the same time, 12 accounts needed password change immediately because the passwords were being used across the classes. The trial 2 was with more number of users but less features. And in that trial, we found that social security number was given out on 170 sites. 14 of them are no longer functional. So it is not known what happens with the social security number given out on those sites, or if whether the user is even aware of this situation. Finally, to conclude, Appu detects automatically the sensitive data, and to increase user awareness, it shows user all his data at one single point and provides tips to improve security. Questions?
Thank you. What are your questions? Yes, over there.
So just generally, I mean, what are the next steps?
Currently, we have installed this with all these latest features, doing PI monitoring at the active and passive mode. In the control setting, once we get results like everything is working fine, we will get IRB approval and deploy it to the wider base to see how users react to this tool, whether it is helpful, whether they actually change their passwords, or do they actually follow these hints when the hints are customized to their own online behavior, and see if we can change the tool itself to change user behavior, basically.
More questions? Actually, I had one, but I'll ask mine and I'll let Paul. Sure. My question was just, you said, and maybe I don't know enough about security, but you said that one of the biggest problem with the, maybe I should just with it, one of the biggest problem with the one password manager is a single point of failure. So how do you address that in your tool?
No, I mean, they just generate the one. You have to just remember one password to the password manager, and rest of the passwords are generated by the manager. In our case, we don't use password managers. We just like let users choose their own passwords, and we said like password reuse is fine as long as you are taking appropriate caution. Like you are not reusing password across classes where you are using something for critical site as well as for not so critical sites such as reddit.com.
And if I have a backdoor in your code, I can't get the password?
All the passwords are hash encrypted million times, but and also in future versions we will use bcrypt, so it is even more safer.
There was another question here. Yes?
Yeah, just the other one was, do you have a general sense of whether people like using this tool or?
People, the most of the feedback we are getting is like they're very surprised. Like often they were not aware that I was reusing this password across these sites. That is one feedback. Second is I wasn't aware that I have given out this username which is very closely resembling to my real life name. So that is another feedback. Third uses addresses. For example, address is changed or modified and they need to update. The tool helps them to find all the places where they have submitted the same address. So that is another thing.
Yes, let's bring the mic.
Thanks. So what you mentioned part of determining whether they should be changing their password, you're determining if they've reused it across different security levels. Can you speak a little bit more about how you determine what's in one security level versus another and whether it depends on, whether it changes per person? Is it all based on which data they've revealed or is it based on other factors?
So ideally there should be other factors considered. For example, is there any privacy centralized location which details all the security practices undertaken by each site? And based on that, also we should suggest users that do not use the same password on this site because their security standards are not that good. Unfortunately, there is no such like a standardized list of security practices followed by all sites. So we have to at this moment rely on users' data that is being revealed to the services. But yes, in future, that would be a great addition.
So I just want to respond to Paul. Paul? Yeah. The problem with this, I'm one of the authors of the work, so I'm happy to talk about the problems of the work. This is very similar to the talk that we had this morning from Heather. There is no longitudinal follow-up. People go through this sort of awareness issue. They say, oh, this is awful. And then my eyes glaze over. 30 minutes later, they're back doing what they want. I'm yet to see in this field any tool that has a sustainable way to measure their privacy improvement. And I haven't yet stumbled across a way to make that happen. So 3 years from now, it would be nice to see what fraction of people who heard all these talks or tried all these tools are still making the same kind of mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, this is in a way why I asked what's the future for these kind of things, you know. We see a lot of one-off tools. We don't necessarily see, you know, things built on these tools or extended use or something.
Do you want to add something with the full volume?
No, I don't. Don't want to repeat myself.
I think we need 2 static microphones. Yes, there's one more, please. You can start and we'll have this.
So this tool is based on human engineering. Like what isn't best to understand why people are reusing passwords and what's the best practice to address that. I mean, I understand that you try to raise awareness, but there's a reason why people are using bad passwords or repeating passwords. That's because they cannot memorize or cannot if you're using really hard password on something that has sensitive data, you're more likely to forget that specific password that's so important to you. So instead of addressing the awareness, wouldn't it be interesting to address the reason? I mean, why? I mean, and to introduce best practices or so things like this.
So this problem has been studied a lot because mainly people reuse passwords because there is an overload of accounts and they need to generate a new password and remember it and use it whenever they need it. So that is one aspect. Like if you have 50 different accounts, you do not want to remember 50 different passwords. So then one solution is either you reuse the passwords and you classify the accounts into something like 10, 20, and 3 critical, and then only choose 3 passwords. That is what usually people end up doing. And the problem with that is their classification, this has been studied, their classification is imperfect, and often they mistake, and then later on they realize it. And the second solution to that is the password managers that I also covered. So yeah, this problem has been studied.
Okay, thank you so much.